As we have become used to this pattern of mine, I will introduce the moderators first. Again, in alphabetical order by surname. I would like to introduce Him Mahesh. Him Mahesh has constantly engaged with translations which span English, German, French, and Tamil. Having worked extensively in diverse settings, including India, Germany, and England, her understanding and her sensitivity for cultural diversity is finely nuanced. A student of German at the Goethe Institute, Chennai, her work straddled culture and language at the Goethe Institutes of Pune and Mumbai, the House of World Cultures in Berlin, and as a teacher at the university and in the corporate sector of England. To close the circle, she returned to the Goethe Institute in Chennai as a teacher of German. Her works include The White Lady in the Tree, which is a collection of anecdotes from India, Pakistan, and Southeast Asia, originally written in German by Dirk Engelroth. Zwei Welten, Two Worlds, her translation of 10 short stories by Chudamani Raghavan from Tamil to German. Author portraits of Ambai, Perumal Murugan, and Topil Mohammed Miran, written for the German online magazine of literature Forum India, based in Germany. She was an interlinear translator, mediating between Tamil and German poets for the project Poets Translating Poets, an initiative of the Goethe Institute, Mumbai. For the Goethe Institute's regional project in India, contemporary German drama in South Asian languages, she translated 2 plays by the well-known playwright Roland Schimmelpfennig from German to Tamil. Of the two, The Tin Soldier and The Paper Ballerina, E. Sippayum Kagida Nartakiyum was brought to the stage by Theatre Nisha at the Goethe Institute, Chennai. And that's our moderator, 1. Before I invite her to join us here, I am also going to invite the second moderator, Pir Mohammed Aziz. He is a journalist and media entrepreneur. Creating newer digital spaces for independent journalism is his most passionate preoccupation. It is most apt, therefore, that he is the founder and CEO of Ippode. Ippode is a digitally native media company based in Chennai, which is one of the few independent media entities recognized by the Independent and Public-Spirited Media Foundation, Bangalore. Pir Mohammed, and I quote, would love to see diversity in Indian newsrooms. With great humility, he refers to himself as a foot soldier in furthering the cause of democracy, and he has been a witness to the inner workings of politics in the Indian state of Tamil Nadu for over 2 decades. He's a communicator and a storyteller who shares stories in the media to uphold the Indian Constitution and the rule of law. Delivering a 3-week program on human rights and foreign policy reporting by invitation by the US State Department has enabled him to create a larger network of alumni for civic participation in governance. He engenders newer conversations and mainstreams dialogues of marginalized communities, engaging his users for over 6 hours a week on his disruptive Ippode. Proving truth is as fascinating as fiction. Let's put our hands together and welcome our moderators, Pir Mohammed Aziz and Him Mahesh. Session 3. Of course, I have a quote. And it's a quote that's going to be very close to our hearts. It's by Nelson Mandela, who needs no introduction. He said, if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his own language, that goes to his heart. We're here at session 3, Windows Across the Horizon, Saluting the Tradition of Translation. And our authors are the Honorable Prabha Sridevan, the author of 6 published books, including If There Is a God, Miran Stories, and Echoes of the Veena, which won the Value of Words Award for Translation in 2019, presided as a judge of the Madras High Court for a fair decade. She was later the chairman of the Intellectual Property Appellate Board. Having written columns for Hindu and Dinamani, she is now relishing her retirement, engaging in translating exquisite works from Tamil to English. Let's have with us the Honorable Prabha Sridevan. And we also have the Professor T.M. Yesudasan, retired as the head of the Department of English at CMS College, Kottayam. He was a visiting professor at the Center for Cultural Studies at the Central Institute of English and Foreign Languages in Hyderabad. As Chief Advisor, Malayalam section, he has contributed to journals and anthologies on literature and cultural studies, including the Penguin collection, No Alphabet in Sight, New Dalit Writing from South India. He served as a member of the Translation Advisory Committee. Tunjathirthachan, Malayalam University. His translation of C.V. Balakrishnan's Malayalam novel, Aisinte Pustakam, to English as the Book of Passing Shadows has earned tremendous acclaim and accolade, and it will be on discussion today. Can we have Shri Yesudasan here, please?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure and privilege to share this space with Prabha Sridevan, Professor Yesudasan, Pir Mohammad Aziz, and thank you very much to Value of Words for giving us this opportunity for exchange and interaction. I will make a few introductory remarks on translation itself before we go into the specifics of discussion with Prabha Sridevan and Professor Yesudasan. I'd like to start by tipping my hat to Mini Krishnan, who's not here, unfortunately, but she is editor of literary works and a champion of translation and translators, if only because I chanced upon an article by her when I wasn't even looking for it. I was looking for a folder like this one, and I came across it. And this article, dating back to 2015, delivers 2 metaphors for translators. She quotes Chaucer and Dryden. One goes, the translator is someone who toils, a laborer who toils on someone else's vineyard. And the other one says that a translator works an old field to bring out new corn. I think we will see a few more exciting definitions of translator, but that's it for now. So the question is, what is the task of a translator? Walter Benjamin, the great German philosopher and a translator himself, he writes in his introduction to the translation of the French poet Charles Baudelaire, and he asks this question, what is the task of a translator? And his answer is to redeem that language which is held captive in a foreign tongue into our own, and to release what is trapped in the act of re-rendering it. Giving interesting words there, redeem, held captive, trapped, release, giving the translator the role of a rescuer at the least, if not a savior. At the other end of the spectrum, we also have detractors who look down on the translation discipline as being too imprecise. They say if a page is translated by 100 translators, the chances of two identical versions emerging are next to nothing. But at the same time, another professor, David Bellows, sees in these infinite possibilities undoubted proof of the flexibility of the human mind. So, arguments and counter arguments. Then we come to William Tyndale, a British biblical scholar, Protestant scholar, and humanist from the 16th century, who translated the Bible into English. And sadly, he was executed for heresy. From that tragic martyrdom to Daisy Rockwell getting the translation prize, Booker Prize 2022, alongside her author, Geetanjali, translation seems to have come a long way. At any rate, we can assume that its standing will not be questioned. So, plenty of theories abound in the field of translation. One of the very well-established ones is, of course, fidelity versus freedom. Fidelity as a concept stems from Bible translation because God's words could not be distorted. On the other hand, both Indian and Western scholars argue that meaning is not a static entity, but entirely contextual. In this regard, it's good to remember that the Indian words for translation don't convey the meaning of carrying across, as in translate, but they have very different words for it. For instance, Tamil, moripeyarpu is shifting or transference, and muriyakam would be akam as in create, change, or make. Finding exact equivalence has not been too much of a concern in the Indian tradition. For example, Sri Aurobindo, a spiritual master and a prolific translator, he asks for an intuitive grasp of the language. That is to say, to capture the spirit from the original and replicate it in the translated work. Gayatri Spivak, most of us would know, the cultural theorist, she also pleads for not homogenizing cultures and languages, and she asks for diversity of cultures and languages in the literary works. With that, we are right in the middle of the debate over domestication versus over foreignness. Domestication, that is, the question is, do we subject the translations to the rigors and sensibilities of the target language, or do we keep the cultural markers peculiar to the source language intact? Perhaps maybe thereby making it a stretch for the readers, and in a worst case scenario, even losing them. But will we lose them is the question. If somebody bothers to pick up a book from another cultural or linguistic milieu, won't he or she also not take the next step of entering that space with curiosity and willingness to explore? That is exactly the track or the take by Ilya Troyanov, a well-known writer, translator, writer from Bulgaria, but lives and works and translates in Germany, who has a radical take of deliberately signaling the foreignness of the text. And the idea is that a reader with healthy curiosity can find out the meaning in this age and stage. In fact, in a recent book of his, which plays in India in the colonial times, he has Sanskrit verses at the start of some chapter, and which he does not even translate. So, as a contrast to that, we have the scholar, iconic scholar, translator par excellence, and writer A.K. Ramanujan, who wants to translate the reader as well as the text, translate as in carrying across, I guess. In his translator's note to Samskara, the work by Anantamurthy, he writes that a translator hopes to not only translate the text, but also, against all odds, translate a non-native reader into a native one. And the notes that he gives at the end of the book are supposed to be part of that effort. I'd like to end these introductory remarks with a question and perhaps a facetious answer. Can we dispense with translations altogether? Yes, we can. We just need to, in order to communicate with people, other people in the world and read their works, we just need to learn their languages. It's just that the prospect of learning 7,000 languages is a daunting proposition. So we can safely say that translation has come to stay, and so do the translators. With those introductory remarks, we can move to the specifics of our conversation. If I might ask the first question, Peer, to Prabha. Before we get into the specifics and nitty-gritty, just by way of drawing a thread through the three authors that you have translated, can we pick on a topic common to the three of them? For example, how would you see how the women are portrayed in their works, perhaps with an example to illustrate it, picking up a story from each one of them?
Greetings to everyone, and thank you for asking me to be here in this session. The three writers, I think you mean Chudamani, Meeran, and Imayam. All of them talk about life, so there is a lot of common. They talk about the world around them. If I were to talk about how each one represents the women, Chudamani looks at women with a very clear eye. She's neither kind nor unkind. She sees women both in their highs and their lows. You can see very selfish, possessive mothers. You can see sacrificing sisters. And an absolutely liberated woman. I mean, in the short story or novella of Nangam Ashramam, she writes about a woman who passes through 4 stages of life, which she represents as 3 partners, and finally the partner death. I think the book came in the 1970s, and Mr. Malan, a writer, has told me that for months on end, the writer community could not believe that such a story could be written. So, Chudamani deals with women like that. As for Miran's women are very silent. There, I cannot think of any story, even leave alone the short stories that I have translated, even his novels, they are very silent. They are, they are critical, but it's just by their presence. They don't say anything. And yeah, that's how his world, I think the women in his world were, he is not saying I approve of it, but he is just showing us those women. As for Imayam's women are very strong, very resilient. They are fighters. And even when the women are silent, as in Enkada, which is a remarkable tale, it's about this man and the woman. It's narrated by the man, and you can see how clingy he is to that woman. He cannot do without her, but staying with her is also a torture. But you hardly hear the woman speak anything. But it's all about her. The craft is very, very, very subtle and extraordinary. If you want me to read out, I think I'll defer it a little later after we hear Professor Justus.
Him was talking about fidelity to the text, fidelity versus freedom. And Mr. Yesudasan, in his introduction to the book of Passing Shadows, has said that he wanted to maintain fidelity to the text, especially because the book involves the scripture, the biblical words. So, is that the only reason, or you are doing that? Even to the other parts of the book, you wanted to remain very faithful and bring out that, because I was talking to Prabha the other day in preparation for this meeting. She was talking about getting the sound of the language. She was using the word cadence. After finishing the translation, she checks for the sounds of the language. Do they sound exactly or closer to the target language? The source language. So, do you also look at that, the rhythm of the language while translating? Because I'm seeing Chetan, Chedati, all that, which gives a semblance of the language there. Apart from that, it sounds like any other English novel. So.
Thank you for the question. I have in my note, translator's note, made it very clear. We have to, as translator, we must be responsible to the author, the original work. And I use the term fidelity because it is by being faithful to the text, we can serve the text best. But I say this with qualification. It is the aspect of a moral content, your responsibility to the work. You cannot be irresponsible. At the same time, we are aware of the history of translation. Saint Jerome is known to be the patron saint of translators. And he insisted on exactitude. But he later I, qualified it saying, I meant it for the scripture. In other works, you need not go by the word by word translation. There, we have to take the echo of the original, the dhwani in the Sanskrit. Yeah, I think the translator of Gitanjali Sri's work, Daisy Rock, she has made it clear. The dhwani of the original work, how to uh, make it audible, understandable, appreciable to the reader. That is the problem. So it is not simply the literal technical rendering of the original work, but the modes, there are the moods and the emotions, everything is there. So that is very important. By emphasizing fidelity, I meant that too.
One more small question to you. You mentioned that the author used mostly the Maniparavalam, the old Bible, because it was originally written 30 years ago. And when you translated, it was 30 years later, and you wanted not to use the King James version of the Bible, but you took a newer version which uses the contemporary English language. So that choice was with the audience in mind, right?
See, when you look at the history of translation, you find that there have been several translations. For example, Arabian Nights, several translations. The Bible, the most exact word of God, it had several translations. Even recently, when the Sambhurna Bible was translated into Gujarati, they recruited a poet, Joseph Makwan, to translate the Psalms. The Lord is my shepherd, he translated into Gujarati as, instead of shepherd, he used koval, the cowherd. So you are not translating to your contemporaries, your compatriots alone. You are translating for the other readers. So I had to change my fidelity to the Old Testament, King James version of the Old Testament. And I used instead the Revised Standard Version.
Now I am asking the question to Prabha. Particularly you, when you were talking about the Dubai man's wife story. So I heard you kind of raved about it. No, it's such a great story. In terms of story technique, it was great. But again, there is a challenge. You also said that now you use the language of the villages, so you have to be very simple. The prose has to be super simple so that it represents, it's a true representation of the author's language. But at the same time, we had these challenges with the literature, particularly the way it is represented. The Dubai man's wife, the fidelity of the Dubai man's wife is always suspect. That is again reinforcing the kind of social norms or the social representations. What we fault the mainstream media for, the repeated reinforcement of stereotypes. Did you, as a translator, as a former judge, had any challenge with the text, particularly with that Imam story?
Okay. Now I should explain the Dubai man's wife in a crux. This girl's husband is in Dubai. So in the village, she's called the Dubai man's wife. They've even forgotten her name in a sense of they respect her. And then she has an affair with a man. She gets a phone call. I mean, that's what the story says. There is a phone call from her husband saying, I'm coming today. He has never before done that. He has always given her warning. I'll come in 10 days, but not like I'll come today. And so her thought process, how the affair happened and why it happened. And then you realize, she says that my husband is such a good man. And why, when I had a diet of milk, did I put my hand in cow dung? I mean, there is self-recrimination. She refers to other women in her village who have absentee husbands, who have had affairs and nothing is wrong, their life is fine. So this goes on. And finally, she decides that she should not live. And there is a train that comes on time from Erode. And MIM ends with the Erode train came on time. But you are never sure if there was a real phone call. Was it her guilt? And when I translated it, I was not judgmental peer. I was suffering with that Dubai man's wife. All the torture she went through, I went through when I translated. And after doing 2 pages, I'll close it because I won't be able to do more. Because the torture, the stream of consciousness, the flow, everything when I bring it in the other language, then I suffer the whole thing. And 2 of the remarks that Haim made, I would like to touch upon. The chairs were brought from there to here. I think that's what the translator does. She comes closer to the reader. And about the words, if there are so many translations of the Bible, they are all different. And somebody said it's never identical. That's because each translation there is Miran plus Prabha, there is Chudamani plus Prabha. I mean, Prabha is not absent. She has to be there because I am as much of a creator. I am no less. So that is why each version is different, because there is a bit of that translator. So this is an answer to your question.
Now, the element of any text. So I want to precede it with a little, not an anecdote, but from the cultural or translation history. We all know that the first line of any fictional work is very important, and we have iconic first lines. One such is from The Outsider by Albert Camus. And a creative writing professor, Ryan Bloom, has dedicated a whole article to just that one line. And that first line reads in French, Aujourd'hui, maman est morte. 4 simple words, even a school-going child can translate. Mother died today. So what's the big deal about the debate? The debate was over that one word, mother, and also the word order. We'll leave aside the word order, but the word that they were debating over is mother. Why was it important? In order to understand that, we need to read the whole book, and our judgment of the protagonist who has committed a murder in the story depends on how we view him, how his relationship with his mother, whether he is a kind and caring person or cold and heartless or whatever. So the translators, subsequent translators felt that mother sent wrong signals. It was a bit cold. Mommy would have made us feel very sympathetic towards him, but that would have been also wrong. So should it be mum or mummy or whatever? So after 42 years, the latest translator decided to go with mama, the original word. My question to you both would be, have you had to struggle with one word, one sentence, one phrase, one passage, or whatever to convey that meaning?
See, some of the struggles are the titles. The translators need not translate the title itself. It's not necessary. It's enough if you give the feel of the story. My first editor, and I always tell Minnie that, she will always be my first editor. There may be many editors that come subsequently, but the place of the first editor nobody can take from her. So there was a title of a book which is Madimela Puna, which means when a cat crosses your path, it's bad omen. But if you have the cat on your lap, it will jump at any time. So you are carrying that bad omen with you all the time. So I can't make it cat on my lap. It will sound silly. So we thought about it. It's about an aunt who is single, who resents her niece probably going to get married. So she somehow tells the people what I would call the boys' family, typical Indian English that is. She calls the boys' family and gives them some negative thing about the girl, and then that match collapses. And finally, you will know that this is the girl. These people will wonder, who could have told them? Who could have told them? So then we gave the title, Who Could Have Told Them? So there are some difficulties, and like this Mama, for Miran, I have used Mutupa, which is the elder mother, elder father. I've used that because then it is very clear that it belongs to a particular region. I think the translator should not forget the regional roots. At the same time, I'll tell you something that'll make you laugh, because it's close to lunchtime. I think you must laugh. This Miran was tough, because Miran is not only Kanyakumari, that Tamil itself is different. And then he also used Arabic words. So it's very, very difficult. So I asked my colleague, Justice Akbar Ali, please introduce me to someone who has literary sensibility, who comes from that region. So he said yes. And he introduced me to this gentleman called Takkala Halima, who's become a great friend. I had translated the word vota piece as a municipal election office. So the way we would correct the words is, I would send my translation to Halima, and Halima will read it and say, I'm ready. So then I'll call him. I'll read the Tamil, he'll read the English, and then it'll all. Then he said, what is this municipal election office? So I said, what office? What do you mean? Vote, office, so municipal election office. Then he said, but smoke is coming from that office, why? Those are all disqualified votes. My imagination was running right. He couldn't stop laughing. He said, no, wood is that cashew kernel. It's the cashew factory and they're burning the cashew kernel. So then I corrected it. So these are pitfalls. And I think the translator should be aware. And every now and then Halima calls me and said, today I was in a bad mood and I thought of Vota piece and then I laughed. So that is something that if we are not aware, we may have translated it into a very wrong term, which will give the reader quite the wrong intention. So these are difficulties, but it's not an easy job. So we have to work hard to get it close to the original writer.
You must forgive me for violating your injunction against translating the title. I have translated the title. Instead of Book of Life, I have translated as the Book of Passing Shadows.
Lovely.
Okay.
That's good.
Yeah,
It's poetic.
Yeah, that is the way the original, it struck a chord in my mind. And I was trying to reflect that echo in the translation.
That is funny.
Yeah, yeah.
Looks like we are close to 5 minutes, I'm told. Yeah, one question, maybe it's a bit tricky, but yeah, we can talk about the problems as well. Context or culture specific equivalence. We talked about finding equivalence. There's a poem by a Swiss-German writer, and she says, I smell of arnica, the smell of elderly women. It's a paraphrase, it's not the actual sentence. And her English translator, in close collaboration with her, she decided to translate arnica, change it to talcum powder. I smell of talcum powder, the smell of elderly women. Although arnica is very well known in England as well. So the writer explains it like she was not translating a word, but a perception particular to that context. So if you had to translate it, what would you choose for an Indian readership, and would it cause problems? Would you see any problems with that?
See, in India specifically, talcum powder is not age related. I think everyone uses. So to say that I smelt talcum powder and I smelt old woman will not resonate with us. So I have to think of something, maybe shikakai, I don't know.
Shikakai.
Yeah, maybe that, I'm not sure. But it's only when I sit with that text I will know. But talcum powder is not, I think, for India. I think it won't work. That's my view.
For me, there is no need of translating it. Yeah, you can
Arnica.
retain it.
Yeah.
Because no language in India is pure, unadulterated. All languages are adulterated by other influences. The Arabic, the Persian, the Urdu, everything. English, French, Dutch, Sanskrit.
Yeah. No, I agree. I asked a German friend about this, and she said, well, it's interesting because we associate women of a certain age with the perfume of eau de cologne, for example, the cologne perfume. So I just wondered if we, as translators, would find some other equivalent, because for some reason they moved away from Manika, although she didn't have to. So I think we are out of some concluding remarks allowed. Well, I just want to conclude with this remark. It's hard enough to express one's own emotions and feelings and thoughts in one's own medium, and the translators have to do it in another medium, which is a harder task. And translators do that. I mean, they mull, they think, consider, make choices, and not only that, they fret and agonize over those choices. and all most of the time staying invisible, or it has been like that so far. But translators such as who we have here are thankfully casting aside, I would say, the invisibility cloak and putting translation firmly on the literary map. One word I want to add to value of words, excellent topic for the session, windows across the horizon, saluting the tradition of translation. Yeah, as we know, window is a meeting point between outside and inside, and this evokes somehow translator after translator perched on many, many windowsills, looking in both directions and bringing the outside and inside together. So definitely a salute is in order. Thank you.
What a graphic and vivid visual you concluded with. That was so beautiful, thank you. And every challenge that you face and every joy that you face as translators, we feel with you. And for me, I really cannot imagine how difficult it will be when you translate from English into an Indian language. And then comes the question of the purity of the language you are using as opposed to the freedom the original author would have. And the list is endless. But thank you so much for your yeoman work, without which so many valuable books would not be enjoyed by the readers they're meant to be enjoyed by. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for moderating this beautifully. Both the moderators, thank you. A token of our appreciation for your time and efforts. And your words, of course, here, before, and hereafter. Thank you.